welcome to another KO Short. In the last video we were talking about Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, who in 2 Chronicles chapter 20 faced a battle with impossible odds. 3 armies had risen up against Judah, but Jehoshaphat didn't allow his alarm and uncertainty to overcome him. And in Jehoshaphat's response, I think there are 4 practical steps to taking captive every fool. And today we're looking at the second of those 4 practical steps towards taking captive every fool. And that is this, that Jehoshaphat stood firm on what he knew instead of focusing on what he didn't. He stood on the unchanging character and promises of God. As Jehoshaphat stands before the nation, he lists all the things that he knows that God has done and all the things that he knows God is, rather than focusing on his fears. When we had our first son, Ezekiel, I remember going through the most painful couple of hours of my life. It was worse for Emma, of course, but after 48 hours of labour, something went majorly wrong. We were in the delivery suite when suddenly something changed. Emma dropped unconscious, Zeke's heartbeat stopped in the womb, and Emma began to bleed heavily. Chaos ensued. There were alarms going off. There were doctors and midwives running in and out of the room as they whisked her out of the room and into theatre, leaving me sitting alone. And I remember doing the only thing I knew to do, which was to pray. I looked at the clock, it was 5 a.m. and it seemed like time wasn't moving at all. But I prayed and I prayed. I was like, God, will you save my wife and child? At some points I was angry. I was like, God, where are you in this? After a while, I felt the Lord speak to me. And he said to me, if the worst is to happen, will you still follow me? Now that really angered me at first. I was like, God, will you just save my wife and child? God, I will do anything for you if you save my wife and child. But after a while, I began to wrestle with the question. And I realised that God had always provided for me. I counted countless times that he provided for my family, that I'd encountered him, that he'd been involved in my life. I realised who he was and what he'd done. And I reluctantly came to a place after a battle of saying, God, I don't know where you are in this, but if the worst is to happen, it doesn't change who you are. Yes, I will follow you. At 6:40 a.m, a midwife came into the room and gave me the news that Emma was fine and in recovery, and that Zeke, despite being extremely ill when born, was in special care and he was going to recover. I went outside to ring everyone and give them the good news. And I turned my phone on, which had been off, to receive 3 text messages sent from 3 different friends who didn't know each other. They lived in different places in the country. One was up north, one in Wales, one in Swindon. And each of the messages said basically the same thing. At 5 a.m, they were woken up by the Lord to intercede for us as a family, to pray for Emma and the baby. That's where the Lord was. He was in it. In the midst of my uncertainty, God was still there. Now, I know things don't always work out sweetly for everyone. Even for me, there have been times when things have happened that I still have questions about. But the point isn't that God saved my wife and child. The point is that in the midst of my uncertainty, he was there. And when I face doubts or fears or uncertainty, I know I'm tempted to focus on that and to look away from what God has done in the past. But just like Jehoshaphat, I think the second thing to taking captive every fool is simply to remember what God has done and remember who he is and focus on that. We can remember the things God has done by making a list of the times that he's met with us, the times that he's provided for us, the times that he's come through for us. We can keep a journal that says the things that God does daily for us and say, this is the God that I follow. And we can also get into his word and find verses that tell us who he is. When Jesus in Luke 4 is faced by temptation from Satan as he's in the wilderness, he replies to every lie and every untruth with scripture. This is who my God is. And we can do the same thing by getting into the word and finding the antidote to the very doubt and the very feeling that we're feeling. This is what God has done, and this is who God is. And if we are to be people who are going to take captive every thought, it's important that we don't let go of what he's done for us, and that we don't lose sight of who he is, and simply choose to stand on that as our firm foundation. Amen.